for our health series. So I'd like to say good afternoon. My name is Melissa Stasio Etienne, and I serve as a volunteer for the Latino Alumni Society. I'm a proud alumni of the University of South Florida, go Bulls, and have earned my MBA from the wonderful St. Leo University. I currently serve in a role of HR leadership. But today, to begin, I would like to acknowledge our continued solidarity and belief in much needed change in our country. We continue to support and encourage everyone to stand up and seek out how you can make an impact in your community. This week, we recognize some noticeable changes, especially in cities where, in particular, some Confederate statues once stood proud. We've seen changes there. In addition, the Marine Corps no longer allowing some oppressive flags to fly on base. In addition, NASCAR's announcement yesterday, and countless organizations that are taking a stance. So we continue to encourage everyone to make and be empowered to make an impact in your community. So like anything, this change, and like any change, our mental and emotional health is challenged, which is why we are so excited to have this panel discussion to bring to light in ways we can all take better care of ourselves and our loved ones. With that, I would like to introduce our esteemed panel. Dr. Ruben Faluji, don't kill me, and Justin McLean. Justin is currently the co-owner and a licensed therapist at Home Again Counseling in downtown St. Pete. Justin guides his clients through unwanted feelings of anxiety, depression, and anger toward an internal place of relief. Justin is specially trained in counseling individuals through recent and past traumas. He has years of experience working with children and adults involved in the foster care system and the public school system. He's attained his master's from the Florida State University and a bachelor's from the University of Central Florida. He is a community advocate and currently serves on the board of directors at CASA. Thank you for being here, Justin.
Thank you.
And Ruben is a therapist at the University of South Florida's Counseling Center. Ruben completed his doctoral training at the University of Missouri in counseling psychology, where he was recognized for his involvement in activism addressing individual and institutional oppression. Ruben uses his wisdom gained from various life experiences and his training in psychology to inform his work with his clients, groups, and organizations. His interests include multicultural counseling, identity development, conflict resolution, community team building, diversity, and social justice education. Thank you for being here as well. All right, gentlemen, we're gonna have a fun discussion. We have a lot of people online excited. I believe we had over 250 people registered, but unfortunately we can only host 100. So we'll get the recording out as quickly as possible. And some housekeeping for those of you online, please, we have people on board monitoring the Q&A. We received some questions ahead of time that we're gonna incorporate into the discussion. So please use that. But to kick off, I'd like to start with our panelists with some questions. What are the most critical changes that we must take when facing our future effectively in the context of mental health?
Okay, I'll go first. I guess I'll take it first, Ruben. What I'm seeing is removing the stigma of mental health. There's still a lot of folks, especially in our Black and brown communities, and especially being men, there's still the stigma of not being okay, and it being perceived as a weakness if you want to go seek out some help. And another part, a critical change is just the access to services. Just being like, because there's a lot of folks out there that have lost their jobs, right? And there's meaning that they've lost insurance benefits and they're unable to pay for mental health services. And then I'm sure Ruben could talk on this too, of just, in that private pay sector too. Because for instance, if I didn't accept insurance at my practice, I have for an hour session, it's about $100, and that's a lot to ask for somebody, and especially if you need care every week, that's a lot, but something else to balance out the cost is, I do accept insurance, and then also I do some sliding scale and pro bono stuff that I do.
Nice.
So everything that Justin said, 100%, everything. And just to add a different layer, I think our attention, we're distracted as individuals and as a society. And I think I talked about it in the last time we had this space, but then also ever since, I don't know, it's kind of just been my theme, but put your mask on, folks. Put your mask on. And I've been telling people, I'm not talking about the coronavirus mask. I'm talking about you taking care of you, because a lot of times we're focused on said issue, said person, more so than we are ourselves. And what we do is we end up suffocating ourselves. And I'm watching it happen slowly but surely as, racial tensions and coronavirus continue to plague us as a society. Folks are literally killing themselves, hating people, killing themselves, trying to create change, when the first and most important person to anything is the self. So I think the most critical issue right now is folks spending time with themselves and healing their wounds, because those wounds are, when they're not healed, we start inflicting wounds on other people. And that's why we have isms. And that's why we have a lack of leadership. That's why we have challenges in our communities, because folks aren't taking time to heal themselves, which is connected, to what Justin's saying. Ideally, a place to do that is therapy. But for so many reasons, therapy is not accessible, or, because, again, we haven't healed. There's a lot of shame and stigma with therapy. But again, the key is putting your mask on first so we can recognize it. I even need help or support.
Yeah. I remember when you mentioned that during the first session, and I was like, it seems simplistic, but it's so right. So thank you for sharing that.
Ruben, can you elaborate on the mask too? Like, just in case if we have, because I love it. I love it.
So, no, yeah. It's a therapist thing, so I co-opted it, but it's so powerful. So if you all have had the privilege of being on a plane, you have the flight attendant who's at the front talking about safety, and a lot of times I have my headphones on, but what they're talking about is what happens if the cabin depressurizes. There's not going to be oxygen in the plane, so the masks fall, they're oxygen masks that fall. And what they tell you, and I always ask my clients, what do they tell you to do first? Like, put your mask on. And it's like, perfect. Why do they tell you to do that? Well, because if you don't put your mask on first, you're not going to be able to help other people. So, how does that connect with all of our lives? Like, how much time do we spend focused on other people at the expense of ourselves? And it's not an invitation to be selfish. No, because actually when we tend to ourselves, we actually can help more people and survive. But when we don't do that for ourselves, we actually need other people to help us, and we need more resources. Thanks for getting me to clarify that, Justin, because I just assume,
Yeah.
No, good point. I know there's a lot I'm getting a lot of text message. People are taking notes, so good. Awesome. So I'll move on to the next question. So what is the most interesting trend when it comes to mental health that you guys have seen for 2020?
I would say it's in the delivery of services, because what are we doing right now? We're in front of a computer, we're on a Zoom call, right? So with the transition of COVID, we've had to do all my sessions have been done online, and that causes another barrier, because I work with a lot of folks that may not have stable internet. I work with a lot of young folks that don't have privacy within their own homes. And things like that. So it just creates a whole nother barrier that we have to figure out solutions to make mental health services equitable to all. So that's the most interesting trend I've seen in 2020.
I want to say ditto to everything Justin said, because he's spot on with it. Like, even at the counseling center, we saw a significant decline in utilization of services, and it was for a variety of reasons. In some ways, folks, needed to focus on, the change environment and adjusting. Other folks, like Justin was saying, didn't have privacy to have this type of service in their different environments. You know, some folks were like, you know, I'm staying with, you know, 7, 8, 9 people in the same house, and they can hear me through the walls. Like, this isn't fit for me. And so we, as a center, we're trying to work around some of these challenges in terms of access. But in another way, like, the laws were, you know, related to telehealth changed so quickly. Like, people were lobbying for years to, you know, be able to practice across state lines, and literally within days, legislation changed. So it was like, oh, things can change really quick when you really want them to. So it's interesting how, you know, these changes do create inequity, and they also create opportunities, because, you know, everybody in, you know, three or four people in the center were doing telehealth before, where I'm at the counseling center, and now everybody's doing it. That's the primary modality. So I guess I would share that. And then another one, to me, my perception, I'm starting to hear the conversation of therapy and healing more so than I've ever heard. So in terms, there is a stigma that's still thick, especially in unique communities like Black and Brown, men. There is another layer. And I'm also hearing that conversation shift and evolve. I'm starting to hear athletes talk about mental health. I'm starting to hear, you know, just a conversation about healing and mental health that I haven't heard in previous years.
Definitely. So I'm going to read something that just came through on the chat from Carla. I hope you don't mind I named you. I think it's so powerful that we have 2 men of color speaking to us about mental health. The mental health therapy industry, at least locally, seems to be dominated by women, and mostly white women. How do we make mental health more accessible? The men of color in my life still have those stigmas Justin just spoke about.
Ruben, you want to start with this one?
That's such a powerful question, and I appreciate the acknowledgement. You know, even me, I get excited when I see, you know, brothers of color, you know, who are therapists and who are talking this talk. So, but I think it starts with how we're programmed as a kid. Yeah. Like, I went through a very grueling process, and I'm still going through it, of really peeling back the layers of socialization and programming I got from my family, from religion, from playing college football. Like, everything told me, all these messages told me that my feelings didn't matter, or I needed to be quiet, be seen, not heard, or that, you know, emotions are weak. And so it hit me that this is destroying me internally, and this is destroying people around me. Like, you know, the damage I was doing to women, I didn't realize it. I was like, oh my God, like, I'm part of the problem. And so part of that was finding spaces where men could emote, and that was okay. And then also giving myself permission to just be who and what I am. So that, and then just a desire to peel back the layers of social cultural programming and socialization away from my emotions. And that is what I think has allowed me to enter this profession, and kind of be a model in that way. I'm very open. I tell people I'm an emotional and sensitive man, and I don't feel bad about it at all. Like, I think you need that modeling. And so continuing to model that men and emotions can go together, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I want to go with that, and I agree with everything Ruben said, and I think it does start with, you know, the young people and the message that we're getting, right? And I got the same messages growing up. So Ruben will tell you, in order to do what we're doing, there's different avenues and different paths, right? So Ruben has a PhD, as a doctorate. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I went the social work route, and doing therapeutic work. You know, even I had no idea what a social worker was growing up. And the only social worker I knew of, they're going to take me away from my family. You know, and whenever I've done it in the Pinellas County schools, whenever I said, hey, I'm a social worker, people get all uncomfortable. They're like, oh, no, I don't want. And I'm like, no, I'm not that type of social worker. I'm here to help you, you know, and this is what I do, you know, and having those conversations with our young people. And that goes with removing that stigma of saying, hey, it's okay to say I'm not all right. It's okay to say, this makes me sad, you know, and this goes into Ruben's point, and it's an idea of what real masculinity is, just being sad or fearful of something does not make us weak. And being vulnerable, I argue that, that revolves around a lot of my work, that's true strength, you know, to being vulnerable around others. So I've made it a mission, just like Ruben, I tell everybody, saying that what I do, you know, how I feel, everything. So, and hopefully we get some more people into the field that look like us. But then there's also something that I struggled with getting into the field. I felt like a sellout going into social work. I felt as if I did, and I'm part of a group on Facebook, it's Black Men in Social Work. And there's a lot of brothers in there that express the same thing of saying, if I'm not helping the most needy, then I'm selling out. If I'm not doing child welfare work, if I'm not working with the homeless, I'm not doing that stuff, then I'm a sellout. And I struggled with that because in reality, doing mental health and therapy, I'm working with privileged people that can afford services. Just going back to our first point, you know, and that's a struggle that I have to deal with, right? And I was the first person from my family to get to where I'm at, you know, to get that college degree, get that graduate degree, you know, and even internal with my family, the message was, yo, go do something that makes you money, you know? So it's just trying to balance that and just being open.
That's beautiful. Kudos to the two of you because we are getting questions galore. So I'm going to try to do my best, guys, to incorporate everyone. So so here's a question. How do we find the right therapist? At times we don't seek therapy because we feel like there are not many therapists that look like us or really understand us.
Yes, you had that document that was so crispy. I loved it. So please take us home on this one.
So yes, that's a great, so the resource will be shared with the group, you know, because my business partner and I found that a lot of people struggled with that. A lot of folks would come to me and say, hey, things are not okay, but how do I find a therapist? You know, so I created this document of the first step is really figuring out what the challenge is, what the problem is, and paying attention to what kind of language are you using with people around you. You know, how are you expressing the challenge? Like if it's like, hey, I'm sleeping in the other room from my spouse, you know, or I'm always yelling at my kid, you know, pay attention to those things. So then you figure out, hey, how am I going to pay for it? You know, that's a big struggle. And I went into private pay solutions, insurance solutions, and there's another great thing that a lot of people don't know. It's EAP plans. It's employee assistance plans. So a lot of companies will give you 6 free sessions to see a therapist. But I would take it a step further. Once you get, like, you can look at your insurance or EAP plans, and there's also directories called Psychology Today. There's Good Therapy. There's a Therapy Den. There's Therapy for Black Girls. There's a lot of directories. I would go in there and pay attention. Look at that list on how you described your challenges and read their bios and see if they can speak to you. And most therapists, I don't know if Ruben, you guys do this at the counseling center, but I offer a free 15-minute consult call, right? So I will talk to somebody before they schedule a session with me. And the most important thing for me is, even if I can't help you, I'm going to find someone that can help you. And that's just my approach. But do the pre-work, you know, come up with your own questions, and that will give you a guide on if this person is good, can help you. However, you may get into that first session and feel like, oh man, this isn't going okay. There's other options out there. You know, I see too many people that I see, hey, I tried therapy, but they were awful. You know, I just didn't mesh with them. But there's opportunities out there, and options.
Yeah, and you know, I appreciate. Well, one, I hope we can get that document that Justin made out, because that document was so good in terms of just the steps, because it can seem so abstract and you know, like, you know, we just don't know, which contributes to the stigma. So that's why I appreciate Justin for doing that. Another big thing, because there's so few of us in the profession, it's so important to trust your gut. You know, everybody does not understand everybody in the same way. And it doesn't mean that that's a bad counselor or therapist. It just, everybody has different needs. And so as people of color, it's not to say that white folks or, you know, non-Black people of color can't understand us, but you're paying your money, so you get to ask them, like, what is your level of cultural competence on this issue or with this identity, you know? And, you know, counselors should be able to talk about, you know, where they're at with it or where they're not with it. And if you're not getting that, or you feel like your needs aren't getting met, well, part of it, you got to know what you need and ask for what you need. Because a lot of folks come to therapy, they're just like, heal me. And it's like, no, what do you need and how can we work together? So, but if you're like, you know, 2-3 sessions in and you're like, this person doesn't get me, don't keep going. It's okay to trial and error a therapist. You know, just because one's not good doesn't mean all therapy's bad. Right. And so be open, but also check in with your gut. Am I connecting with this person? You know, are they hearing me? Are they understanding my background? Are they asking the right questions? Do I leave here with strategies to address what I came in for, or do I leave in a worse place than when I started? So kind of just check in with yourself on that.
Yeah, it's like a bad date, right? You're not gonna.
Yeah.
Next one.
How many before you start? You delete that person out your phone.
Awesome. All right, so let me move on. The next one. When someone close to you is resistant to the idea of therapy due to that stigma, how do we help them with that perspective or advocate in a way that we can connect with? Either one.
I'll go. Number one thing is just being that ear, and being willing to listen. Of course, you can share resources. The one thing is that I try to do is just normalize it. You know, I use this example, and I think I might have said it before. You know, I use it with a lot of folks that I talk about. I ask clients, hey, have you worked out this week or ate healthy? And they usually say yes. So I'm like, all right, so you're taking care of your physical health. Okay. And then I ask folks, hey, do you go to church or meditate? And sometimes they say yes. And I'm like, you're taking care of your spiritual health. And I talk about your mental health is just as important as those two, you know, and I tell folks all the time, you don't have to call me a counselor or therapist. You can just look at me as your mental health coach. And when you come in here, all we're doing is training, right? Because I wish I can look you in the eye and say nothing horrible is ever going to happen to you. And there's nothing in this world that's going to make you feel angry, anxious, or sad, but there is, you know, and it's okay to, you know, engage in the therapeutic process. And all we're doing here is I'm giving you the tools to deal with that in a healthy way. Healthy way is the key word.
Awesome.
Yeah. Again, everything. I'm glad me and Justin make a good team.
I know.
He says everything I need to say, but then I get to say things. To me, I think when we think about helping people, it's important to recognize, and even as a helper, as you know, somebody who's trained in therapy and psychology, like I have to be mindful of this. But where are people at in their process of change? Because everybody's not ready to change. And everybody is not ready to go to therapy, you know? And so I sent out a stages of changes by a guy named Prochaska, and he talks about the stages of change. And, you know, folks who are in the pre-contemplative, they're not here. They're not ready. Right. They're not ready. And so with those folks, they need a lot of compassion and patience, you know? And so, you know, you might have to evaluate how much energy do I want to spend on this at this time? And then there are people who might be further along. If you give them more information, you know, that might help push them along in the change process. So be mindful of where the person that you're wanting to help is in the change process, and then that can help you adjust accordingly.
Awesome.
Great point.
I'm going to take the next question. I know we had prep questions for you guys, but these questions are awesome. So I'm just going to keep going through the chat. This person says, I love this so much. My husband recently told me that he felt like he needed to talk to a professional, which was huge for me because he has been taught to repress his emotions. However, it has been hard to find a professional for him to speak with. Where can I find someone for my husband or even myself to speak with?
going back to what we were talking about earlier, if you have insurance panels will have providers in your area by a zip code and things like that. But just don't take a name and call, research them, type their name into Google. Usually a lot of clinicians have a website or the Psychology Today profile.
Nice.
Those are, and then there's also the EAP if you're working for a company. And a little known fact is, just because I was a school social worker for so long, if you have kids, you can also go to the school social worker, your child's school social worker, and they are aware of resources in the community.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's good. So another one's word of mouth. Like if you have friends who are doing who are doing therapy, ask them about their therapist. And then if you're a USF student, you pay for it out of your fees. So come on in.
Good to know. Good to know. Yes. Awesome. So we have our next question is actually submitted by one of your fellow panelists from a prior session.
Oh.
Do you have a quick 5-minute mental exercise or actionable step to take when you are in a funk, simply to stay positive or get back on track? Anything particular from a book recommendation, just to get you back going?
I will share another document with the group. It's these techniques that I use. They're called grounding techniques. I'm sure Ruben uses them. And one of the big famous ones is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique of just being, because there's too many times, like even right now, and we'll get to it later on in the conversation, I'm sure. It's hard because I'm stressed out about what's happening out in the real world, However, when I'm doing sessions, I have to put my game face on, because I'm no help to anyone if I don't do that. So there's grounding techniques which I will do to bring myself into the present moment, because I'm not out there. I'm right here in front of my computer and camera. So things I would do is, like, you point out 5 things in the room around you that normally you don't notice. For instance, my blinds, a crack in the wall, a picture, those things. And then you identify four things that you can feel. Like, say, hey, how does it feel with my feet on the ground, me being in the seat? How does I'm wearing a polo shirt. How does the chair feel against my skin? And then 3, you pick out 3 things that I can hear presently. I could hear my sound machine. I can hear you guys. And if I could probably hear some yard work if I focused. So those are some techniques that really will just bring you into the present moment. And I could share that later.
Awesome. Yeah, and just an FYI for those of you listening, we'll, at the end of this, we'll work on a thank you note that we'll send out to all the listeners with some of this documentation that our panelists are talking about. So, Ruben, did you want to? Oh, good.
Yeah, Justin got great resources, and that's something that, sometimes my clients come in there and I can just feel the anxiety coming off of them. And I'm like, hold on, before you start, let's just do this grounding thing so we can just come back to the present. A lot of the times, a lot of mental illness, it's the challenges with our attention. Usually anxiety is we're stuck in the future, things that aren't happening that are going to happen. Usually depression is we're stuck on something in the past that we haven't healed from. And both of these things keep us away from the present. And the present, last time I checked, is the only thing that's reality. And so for me, the breath is such a powerful tool for me. And then this is why I talk about it. If we're too far in our head or we're stuck in the past, we need to figure out a way to ground ourselves. So I do a lot of breathing with my clients, and I send a guided meditation now. But there's plenty of guided meditations online that you can do. There's an app called Calm and Headspace that both have free meditations. You can set the time limit for based on how much time you have. So those are things that I do. And then affirmations. When I breathe, I'll say, all right, I need to take 3 deep breaths, because I know when I get anxious, my breaths get shorter. And so I know that's a sign for me. You got to be in tune with your body to say, all right, Ruben, you're not breathing, bro. You're going to die. And so it's like, all right, take some breaths. And then what I do is I say, what can I inhale metaphorically that's going to be helpful for me in this moment? So I might say, I need patience right now. And then I say, what can I exhale that's not going to be helpful for me? And so I might say stress or anxiety or worry. And then so I'll take 3 deep breaths in through my nose, slow and controlled. And the air is that patience or love or whatever I need to put in my body. And then on the exhale, I'm letting go of the stress or worry or whatever it is that isn't helpful for me in that moment. And to me, that grounds me in the present. That gives me what I need, and that helps me let go of what I don't need.
Wow. I'm over here taking down notes, guys. You guys are providing that wisdom. I love it. So this is a shout out. I think the point that Justin and Ruben are talking about is so powerful to hear, especially as a father, trying to raise a young man and trying to help him understand that we are not machines. We have feelings, and they're not always happy ones, and how to deal with them. Bravo to them. Thank you. So let me try to work through some of these. Sorry, guys. You guys are getting a lot of love here. The documents, yep, we're sending that out. Let's get a lot of love here. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get through some of the questions. I think maybe as I comb through some of those, let's get to one of the bank questions. What are some common misconceptions people have about mental health therapy or therapy, excuse me?
I think it goes back to what I said. Most folks think mental health and mental illness is the same thing, and it's not.
Right.
Most people think, hey, if I'm going to a counselor and I hear it all the time, going to seek a therapist out, I must be crazy, and that's not the case. There's a lot of folks that I see that are having normal reactions to things, and they just don't have the appropriate tools in their toolbox to deal with it in a healthy way. So I think that's a big misconception that I see.
I think one of the misconceptions, so of course, everything Justin said, but in addition, one of the things I think of is this idea that a psychologist or therapist, counselor, they're going to heal me and fix everything.
Oh.
Like they have the answer. And so I'm very sensitive to that dynamic, and I do a lot on the front end of reminding folks, you got the answers to your life. You've been you for longer than I've known you, and it's deep in you. My goal is to create an environment where you can engage in self-inquiry in a safe space, right? And say or share whatever you want to share to get to that place within you. But I am not going to lead. I'm not going to lead you there. You're going to lead, and I'm going to walk by your side and support you along that journey, which is very different than, save me or change this about me. That's not the approach that I take to therapy.
And I love that, and that's what I do with my clients, because it's a group effort. It's not that dynamic. Because I told someone, I had 2 sessions this morning. I looked at the data. I was like, I wish I can look you in the eye and say one thing and it's going to fix everything. It's not. I don't have that one magic answer. And if we did have it, we would be, millionaires. But it's just not how it is. And it's just understanding it is a patient process,
So we have another great question in the chat. It says that I've always wanted to have someone explain why it's important for us to control our emotions, to not yell or to, quote, go off. I hope that makes sense.
Why is it okay? So for me, because I told you I've served on the board with CASA. What CASA is, I work with survivors of domestic violence, right? So that's my kind of background. And I also I got my start working with kids in therapeutic foster care, so kids escaping, abusive situations. From those lenses, and it all starts in levels, right? So I tell people all the time, it's okay to get angry. I get angry all the time, but it's what you do with that anger. If that anger starts at yelling, and then if it progresses to physical violence, throwing things and things like that, then there's some serious consequences that can be involved. And then as men and as the fathers in the group, I think it's important to make sure your kid knows that they could come to you if they need something, and to create that safe space, and I don't know if people disagree with me. I don't think that point is communicated with you yelling at somebody all the time, so.
Everything Justin said. Every time I go after him, it's just be like, everything Justin said.
You just get a little arrow to point at each other.
Yeah, because if I do this, it's because his box is next to mine. So he said, but yeah, it's, you know, I was just doing I was at a march and I did this thing where, you know, it was a diverse audience, a lot of folks, and it was black, white folks, everybody in between too. And I was like, you know, raise your hand if you felt guilt. Raise your hand if you felt shame. Raise your hand if you felt disgust. Raise your hand if you felt confusion. And everybody raised their hand for everything. So what that told me, and I hope this is what it told the audience, is that again, there's a shared experience in having emotions. Somebody said it in the chat. We're not robots. So I say all that to say, any emotion you feel is valid. Now, what we do with that very valid emotion can either take us closer towards our goals and our value, or can be more aligned with our values, or be misaligned with our values, or align with values that really don't suit us and the people in our lives. So, you know, for me with anger, in the past, I used to say, I can't express that. I'm cool, I'm good. And what that was that was slowly killing me inside, because I was avoiding a very real feeling going on inside of me. And so by trying to control our emotions, we can kind of get in trouble. We can inadvertently invalidate our own experience. For so long, I said, nah, you're not, that didn't make you mad. Or, you hard. That's what he said. You hard. You know, and what the consequence of trying to control the emotion, I don't want to use control, because control has another tone, but I think trying to avoid or not confront the emotion, it didn't allow me to make a decision about what I want to do with the emotion. What would happen is the emotion would just come out in passive aggressive ways in different areas of my life, you know, whether it was with my friends or with my family. And it's like, hold on. But it was because I wasn't validating it, and I wasn't really considering like what I want to do with the emotion, because I was spending too much time dodging it. That makes sense.
Awesome.
And I want to add to that point too, you know, with anger, it is a secondary emotion, right? We use that, and I don't know if Ruben uses it, that we use this anger iceberg, right? Anger is the tip of the iceberg. There's so much stuff below the surface that we don't see. And the initial emotion could be, hey, I'm scared of something. Like Ruben talked about romantic relationships. I've done some stuff, you know, that I'm not proud of, and trying to navigate that world. And, but the core emotion that I had to process was I was scared of being left. That's what it was. And once I identified that, then I could work on that sense or that road of healing and being vulnerable to figure it out. So and as, you know, for the older people in the group, the teachable moment for our young people is just recognizing what that initial emotion is and normalizing it and saying, hey, it's okay to be scared in this situation, or it's okay to be anxious, or things like that.
Right. So. Very good. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to get through all these questions, guys. They're fantastic. So what are some recommendations for people who are in the counseling field and they themselves are seeking therapy?
I don't know what for instance, I can give my own personal experience of, I've seen a therapist on and off for years. And the first time I found therapy, and thank you to people like Ruben, it was at the UCF Counseling Center. That's the first time I was like, oh my gosh, this is therapy, you know, this is what a counselor is. And then I continued that throughout my adult life. But when I was seeking a therapist most recently, I was nervous because in St. Pete, I know people, you know, I'm out there. So I was like worried, like, oh my gosh, you know, people are going to know that I'm seeking help, blah, blah, blah. But there is some confidentiality with stuff. And I purposely, with that, and I found somebody in Largo that's outside of my circle to deal with those insecurities that I had. So I don't know if Ruben wants to chime in or.
Yeah, there is this, I don't even want to call it pressure, but encouragement that if you're a therapist, you should also be on the other end of it and do your own therapy. For a variety of reasons, I haven't been able to do that yet. I've spent time in a college town where I was doing training at the counseling center. So, as a graduate student, I couldn't just go to the counseling center. I never really identified somebody I fit within the community. Again, fit.
Yeah.
We got to be vibing on the same thing,
Yes.
And so for those reasons, I haven't done my own therapy. And therapy, again, it's a tool. It's a tool to get to that place within you. And so what I've done is I've created a very intentional support network for me to get different therapeutic needs met. So like when I'm struggling with race issues, there's certain people in my circle I go to. When I'm struggling with, my perception of self and self-esteem, there's certain people who I know we can have certain conversations that will help me begin to find that place within me. So again, you're seeing therapy as a tool. I find those therapeutic spaces outside of therapy too.
Awesome. So I have a couple of anonymous questions or anonymous folks submitting as well. How do I heal from a domestic violence when I have to communicate with my former abuser regularly due to custody?
That's tough. So with our organization, CASA, what most folks think, and there's domestic violence agencies all across the nation, all across the world, right? So one misconception about domestic violence agencies is all they have is a shelter. And then that's not the case. They and I tell folks all the time, I say, call this number, they will meet you wherever you're at. Like we have advocates that will work with you, and we have, like for CASA, we have advocates and we have attorneys on staff that will work with you through that process. So I would encourage reaching out to your local domestic violence shelter and kind of talking about your situation, and they will help you.
Okay. Ruben, you good? Okay. So someone is asking specifically, I'm a USF employee. Can employees also utilize the counseling center there on campus?
Yeah, I was messaging that person. So the USF Counseling Center serves the students in terms of offering therapy or individual, group, and couples therapy. So if you're an employee and you're not a student, you wouldn't be able to access it. If you were a student, you would be able to. But there is EAP, and I sent the link privately, but I'll also send it to everybody. And if you're an employee, that's where you would go.
Okay, perfect. Beautiful. All right, just trying it. We have 15 minutes left. Boy, we haven't gone through half. We can have the Ruben and Justin show the way we're going. This is beautiful. I love it. So helpful. So much love happening on the chat messaging. I'm not sure if you guys are able to see that because it's impactful for many people. So kind of circling back to some of the things we were talking about at the beginning of the hour, how do you keep your sanity and deal with the racial injustices that you encountered? Essentially trying to keep your cool, I guess.
So let me let you cool off, Justin.
Yeah.
So my message in this talk I gave, the theme was, the time is now to put your mask on. So the same things I tell my clients, I'm telling myself, like, I need to focus on me. What are my boundaries? Do I need to be flipping? One, do I need to watch any more death? Because I don't know of any other race that has their people get lynched over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I said that many overs because that shit is traumatic. It's traumatizing. And, it can almost be like a type of pornography where we get addicted to it, And so I've learned that destroys my psyche. And that adds more fuel to my anger. And that makes me feel less connected to the people I love. And that makes me, it's almost a distraction at a certain point. I'm not saying disengage, but I'm saying figure out what your boundary is with everything, with the current times, with at your workplace. I love my work community, and I work in a predominantly white community. And so, I've had to create new boundaries with my white coworkers, and that's okay. But I had to figure that out for myself. I couldn't wait for anybody to do it. I couldn't wait till an incident happened. I've taken it upon myself to figure out what are my boundaries. And in that way, once I identify healthy boundaries for me, I can at least be my best self. That doesn't mean my capacity is what it used to be before, things started to pick up, COVID and George Floyd, but it at least allows me to continue to function in a way that allows me to live life in a way that's in line with my values,
Okay.
This one? Completely agree. Or this one.
What he said?
Yeah, what he said. Completely agree. And that's
the Brady Bunch.
Right. So that, it's been tough for me. It's been really tough. And especially it's been the perfect mix of, with COVID and having to be inside and paying attention to things more. It's really tough. So I've been with Ruben. I just have to be mindful of just staying in the present moment. And I have to do a lot of positive self-talk and realize everything, like the future's not guaranteed. I'm right here. This is what I have. And one of the big things, and this is where I will get a little nerdy, I've been really reading a lot of Brene Brown's work and talking about shame and vulnerability. And one of the things, and she's done a lot of huge researcher. And she said the one sign of joyous people is by expressing gratitude and practicing gratitude. So it's something that I've done consciously of saying, hey, and it doesn't have to be huge. It could be like, hey, I've had a delicious cup of coffee and I'm thankful for this coffee, or I'm thankful for I have internet that I can do this talk. And self-care is important. So for instance, I'm going with my wife. This is something that we do. We're going on a camping trip. And we're just going out into nature. I'm going to do a fishing, some hiking, and my word choice is on purpose because I just need time to breathe. And just realizing, like Ruben was saying, what is your boundary? What are your needs? And and the extra step on top of that is normalizing it and saying, hey, it's okay that I have to set these boundaries. It's okay that I have to do this. So.
Love that. Getting, again, more love on the chat. You got a big shout out from one of your other featured panelists from last week as well. So let's see here. Okay, hopefully I caught up on the chat questions, guys. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep it all together. So kind of on that, what is, the question says number one way, but I think it's hard to just name one, right? But what is, I guess, a major way that we could make a substantial difference in our mental health as an individual?
I think, like we've been saying, put your mask on, and just maybe adding that step of expressing gratitude and practicing gratitude. I think those are the best ways to kind of do that. So,
put your mask on, people.
Put your mask on.
Put your mask on. I think it's Audre Lorde. She talked about, and I don't think she used these exact words, but how self-care is a form of political resistance, some to that effect, where this idea that taking care of yourself is transforming the society. Isms, our culture, it tells you that you're less than, that you need something outside of yourself to make you happy or to be valuable. And so to begin to shift that, or put your mask on, and really focus on what do I need as a human to connect with myself and other people. That in and of itself, for me, that's my new lifelong journey. Right? And I've committed to that. And I think because I'm doing that, I have a lot more energy to give to the people I love, the people I don't even know, the people, and this is a kicker, the people who hate me for who I am. I have love to give them because I've done my healing. I started with me. Like, there's nothing Trump can say about me to make me feel less than what I know myself to be, because I've done my work and I continue to do it.
Love that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, I'm like, love it.
Yeah.
It's hard to follow with these questions when you guys have these brilliant responses each time. I'm soaking it up. I hope people are as well. So we have another question. Have you guys tapped into the work being done with adverse childhood experiences and how that trauma follows our Black and Brown youth? So, go ahead, Dr. Rubin.
I mean, I'm impressed that people who know about it, because that research has been around for a while. But to me, it just validates and acknowledges we as humans got wounds, but especially as Black and Brown folks, we come from trauma. And trauma can be small traumas that add up to big traumas. Trauma's trauma, and again, putting the mask on, until we begin to heal that, we're going to struggle in different ways, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So that research just kind of underscores this message of how important it is to start healing ourselves.
And then I would just add, for people that don't know what it is, it's when it came to light, because like Ruben was saying, it's been around since the 80s, but the person that really brought it to light is Dr. Burke. She's a Surgeon General out in California. She wrote a book on it about her experience. I think it's Oakland, San Fran, and it's called the Deepest Well. I think that's the book. But look it up, Dr. Burke. It's a great resource, and she also has a TED Talk talking about it. If you'd rather watch something.
Perfect. So let's see. I feel like some of these questions you guys are already answering. What are the best ways to deal with one's anxiety when already limiting the news time, but when seeing it 15 minutes a day, or one hears or sees it so much happening all at once, especially with COVID-19 and all the other new issues across the country?
I would just say, with the mask on analogy, it doesn't have to be for a long time, right? You can take these bits and pieces. Like, for instance, with me, between my sessions, I do 50-minute sessions, right? So I usually have a 10-minute down between sessions. You know what I do? I just sit in my backyard. And I understand I'm privileged to have a backyard, but I just sit there without my phone, without anything, and I just take that time in, and that's my time. Nobody can take that away from me, and that's what I do. So.
Beautiful. We're getting a lot of requests to have another session with the two of you. Someone wrote, "This is fantastic. What a wonderful discussion. Truly appreciate hearing Justin and Ruben's perspective on mental health. Love the realistic and open dialogue. Our Black and Brown communities need this now more than ever. So grateful to USF Alumni Association and the Black and Latino Alumni Societies for bringing this together to provide us such important information and advice. Thank you."
Thank y'all for having me and us.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I love it. So
let's see. How about how do you support we have 5 minutes. Wow. How do you support others who are fixating on the external negativity?
I personally, what I've learned to do, because I used to get stuck on, why aren't these people changing? I want this white person to be, anti-racist. I want this Black person to do the healing because they're my brothers. I see this vision. What I've had to learn how to do is focus on what it is you want and you model it. So I want love in the world. And so what I do, instead of focusing on people outside of me, is I focus on all the ways that I can give love in every moment of my life. And so if you focus on that, you'll have less attention to focus on these other things, or you'll balance it, at least, where you're not giving too much time, or you're not holding resentment for people who aren't doing what really you're called to do in some ways.
Love that. Justin, are we just doing, okay. I'm in the middle, so it looks like that.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome. So I'll ask this last question. So I've done this in different forms in multiple different ways. So this is my summary of what people are asking. How do we help bridge the gap amongst generations when it comes to discussing mental health?
It's a difficult one. All right. So first thing is just this type of thing, right? There was a woman in the chat saying, I'm going to talk to my husband about it. I've done another one of these chats, and a call came from it. Hey, my dad is interested now. It's just really talking about it and having these conversations, because honestly, these conversations are being had other places, in the barbershop, out at the cookout, we're talking about our stresses, and stressors, and just normalizing those conversations amongst all of us. So,
my man Justin, he's hot today. So the power of discussion is understated, and I'm not talking about debate where there's right or wrong, but really, and actually, if you want to get technical, it's dialogue. This idea of trying to understand where somebody's at. Like, how, as a younger person, can I understand the generational differences and experiences of older people? And how, as an older people, can I allow myself to open to hear the experience of younger people? Because they are different experiences. This book, y'all, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, this book, even I went to school for 6 years, and this book has really helped me understand that the ways we communicate, the ways that we've been taught to communicate, alienate people. We tend to shame, blame, guilt, judge people, and that's not conducive to really connecting with people and understanding them. And so the book talks about, it gives a framework for how we can start communicating non-violently, and how we can start, understanding what our needs, our feelings, needs, and our desires are, and how to make requests for those, but then also how to hear it from other people. It's a very dynamic process. So in addition to the dialogue that Justin's talking about, nonviolent communication, we want our communication to connect, not to separate or harm. I do, at least.
Thank you for the book recommendation.
The book up again?
Oh, Nonviolent Communication. This is the 3rd edition. It's the latest one.
Perfect.
Marshall Rosenberg.
All right. We are down to 1 minute, and there's one great question left, and I want to see if we can get it in. What steps do you think where'd it go? We can take to help get more conversations like this into our K through 12 education systems?
Pay people like Justin and I to come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Put your money where your mouth
right.
is. For real. People are asking me to do speaking, and I do this for the USF Alumni Association because, my job. But, pay me. Put your money where your mouth is.
And that goes with what's